All right, so we're doing it a little bit of a different way. It is currently 5:30 a.m. and it seemed to me that it would make a lot more sense. You know what? I'm actually going to turn my audio over because there's a little bit of an echo. That seems a little better. There, that's much better. Yeah, you know what? It strikes me that 5:31 instead of having to go to sleep makes sense to go here. Normally I have this connected with everything else, but I just kind of wanted to test another way in case I wanted to do something quick and dirty on the computer. I actually spent a good chunk of tonight just trying to help a friend of mine get set up with OBS, and it's interesting how this stuff, no matter how popular OBS gets, it is a finicky piece of software. It does not always work the way you want it to, often does not, and every time you think it's working properly, it doesn't, and then you have to screw around. And every time Windows decides to do an update, you still have to screw around with it. And these are things that I think keep OBS from really being something that can be used for broadcast. Now, one of the things that those of you that watch my live streams, some of my little rants and my tutorials and my background in television, one of the things that's the most important is that the technology and the setup is reliable. And you know what? I'm not actually poo-pooing OBS in any way. I think it does what it does very, very well. And in fact, I mean, I'm using OBS right now. So there's some amazing things that you can do with OBS, but it is an open source piece of software, and you don't want to be spending the majority of your time trying to figure out how to get stuff to work. And to be honest with you, I mean, you shouldn't have everything kind of break once Windows decides to do an update, or you add something, or you do something to kind of try and improve the system. It's just not something that's conducive. I mean, this is one of the questions that I get a lot from people is, why do stations and people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars for pieces of technology when you can do all this stuff on OBS for free? Well, I'll tell you, it's reliability, right? You turn the stuff on, it works, and it works well, and it might take you a little while to configure it, but once you do configure it, generally speaking, you don't have to do anything else with it. And the higher stakes the broadcast, the higher stakes when things fail. And we do a lot of live streaming here at Skycron, a lot of which is done with OBS. But we don't use OBS as our backbone. We use standalone switchers, and we use a separate broadcast unit, and we use hardware encoders, right? We're more likely to use a Teradek and that sort of thing. We use OBS as a backup. So if everything else kind of goes down, it's actually going to be OBS that we're going to be using as a backup, as opposed to something to rely on it. OBS is really good for cases when, I just kind of want to get online and rant and just kind of get on quickly. But I also have a standalone device that does that really well. This just kind of changes things up. Would I be inclined to use OBS for a multi-camera setup for a major sports broadcast? No, I would not. That's not something I would rely on. It is a very high quality stream, and I think it works really well, but it is a very, very fragile piece of software. And, I'm used to getting it to work the way I want, and I've been doing it for a long time, but OBS is what it is. It's a free piece of software that's very popular, and it's extremely powerful, but it is open source, and it doesn't always work right out of the box. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that can happen, and something as simple as a Windows update can take a fully functional, completely working setup that you might have for OBS, and then it just stops working. And then you have to spend hours and hours or days and days trying to kind of go through your chain in order to find out what the problem is. And this is one of the reasons that I kind of put OBS and those sorts of pieces of software at a little bit of a lower, I guess, tier than other more professional and more robust solutions that, of course, cost more money. vMix is certainly something that is capable of working in a live broadcast television environment. Is it my first choice? No, but I mean, it's reliable and it works really well. Rod Peterson, good friend of mine, he has a television series up in Canada called The Rod Peterson Show. It's kind of like a Dan Patrick show type thing, and it runs on one of the networks up here. And, they use vMix and it works really well for them. But I don't think that anybody would be using OBS because there's too many things that can go wrong. It's good for a starter and it's extremely powerful. But once you start adding more things to it, then you raise the probability at an infinitesimal level that things are going to break and not going to work. And these are things that I think are important to be considered when people decide that they want to kind of jump on the live stream bandwagon. I am a traditional broadcaster that has been doing this for about 20 years. I've been doing this a very long time. And even I find OBS sometimes to be extremely frustrating. It doesn't always work the way you want it to, and you should expect to have to set aside every time you do a broadcast to have to do some troubleshooting and some sleuthing to figure out why things are doing what they're doing. And in a professional broadcast environment, there's just no time for that kind of thing, right? You don't want to be tinkering. You want to have everything up and work. And this is one of the things that I think are the key differences between, broadcast industrial level equipment and stuff that is good for everybody. The other thing that I also think that this is a good opportunity to address is when people decide that they're going to get into live streaming themselves. Oh, I don't need to pay a company to do it. And then they realize it's not that easy. It's not that easy to make everything work. And then even if you're able to, it's not easy to make it go in a professional manner. That's why you hire companies like ours to set it up. I can tell you that there's a good amount of companies that, are like, oh, we're just going to do our own live stream. And then they'll call us, a couple of months later. Oh my God, this is so hard. This is too hard. A lot of what you're paying for is not the equipment. A lot of what you're paying for is not even the ability for it to be online. What you're paying for is the expertise and the experience to deal with all of the things that can go on once you have the tools and deal with that in a professional manner. I think that there's this idea that if you just buy the stuff, then why should somebody else have to do it? And by that token, not that I would put video production on the same plane as a doctor or a mechanic, but, it's kind of like saying, well, you know what, I can get a scalpel and I can get, a bunch of medical equipment and I can look stuff up on YouTube. I'm sure I can figure out how to do surgery myself. Or I'm sure I could, do a better job than a mechanic and I can buy these tools. Or actually, probably a better analogy is saying, oh, well, anybody can go out and buy a pencil. So everybody should be able to draw if they're able to have a pencil. Or anybody can write if they have a typewriter. Just because you have the tools doesn't mean that you're necessarily any good at it. And it takes time to take an extremely technical endeavor and get to the point of proficiency. So I thought this was kind of an interesting sort of early morning bit of wisdom or whatever you want to call it. If you're willing to put the time in and gain the expertise, it's extremely rewarding. OBS can do some amazing things. And I think as long as you go into it with your eyes open, I think that there's a lot that you can do. I think it's very exciting that broadcasting is available to some degree to everybody, and that anybody that has content and is willing to put the time in and the effort to learn and the ongoing learning process that it takes to do this sort of stuff is fantastic. But and the other thing that I like about it is it also kind of gives you an idea of how hard it is, right? It's easy to kind of sit on your chair and go, oh, well, this is really easy. Anybody can do this. This is not that hard, when you don't actually have to sit down and do it yourself. But now that anybody can go out and download a copy of OBS because it's free and open source, and you can buy yourself some GoPros and some equipment and all that kind of stuff. Now you can try it and see just how hard it is. You might be able to get it working, but is it going to look as professional as a television broadcast? Well, no, that's going to take time. You need to understand how to use Chiron. You need to understand, basically what graphics work well. Making sure that you're switching and your program flows well, making sure your camera operators are good. There's a lot of different disciplines that make up a really good professional broadcast, and those are the skills that take time. Now, I had a little bit of a head start because, as I say, I'd worked in traditional broadcasting for a long time. I still do, and the principles are very much the same. But OBS is still pretty finicky. Computers are finicky. They do work. They work, I find, more than they don't work. But boy, when things go down, it's a doozy. And that's why you pay the professionals to do it. So I just thought it was sort of an interesting thing to kind of rant about. I mean, I guess if you could call it a rant. And normally I have the nice little graphic, but every so often it's nice to kind of just sort of come on and turn on the camera and just go and say something interesting or something not interesting, or just say something, period, for the sake of saying something that doesn't necessarily have to have all the branding. I mean, God knows I have a production company. We've got plenty of slick content. Sometimes it's just kind of nice to sort of say something. So that's pretty much all I had to say. I'm a little delirious and I couldn't sleep, so I thought, I'd get on and sort of give this a go. So those of you that haven't already, please do subscribe. And while we're on the topic of subscribing, I've noticed that I've been getting a lot of viewers and new subscribers in the last few days. So I thank you for that. I hope you enjoy the content. I certainly hope you enjoy the show, particularly Go Nitro. And we plan to have a bunch of other interesting content. I am very tired. So yeah, please do hit that subscribe button. I will do some more interesting content in the coming days. I've been a little quiet as of late the last couple of days. It's been an extremely busy week for me. But I did want to kind of pop on and let you know that I am still alive and kicking, and there's a lot of exciting stuff coming down the pipe. So thanks so much, and have everybody have blah. Yeah, I need to go to bed. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning now. Anyway, have a good night, and hope you enjoyed, and we'll talk to you soon when I'm a little bit more coherent. I'm a little bit better rested, and there isn't a train going on in the background, which is cramping my style, but that's okay. That's life. Have a good one.